Hello folks, welcome back to the Astrophone channel and thanks for tuning in. In this particular video I want to share my thoughts on what I think is the best affordable telescope you can buy when you want to start your astrophotography hobby in 2020. So without further ado, let's get into it. If you're new to my channel, my name is Wido and I'm an amateur astrophotographer living in Utrecht, the Netherlands, where I perform my astrophotography. And on my channel I share equipment reviews and tutorials that will hopefully also help you to improve your own astrophotography skills. If you're interested in that kind of content, please consider subscribing to my channel by clicking on the button on the bottom right of the screen. And with that, let's move on with the video. So hi folks, I just want to remind you that I am not a technical expert on telescopes and I'm not affiliated with any kind of brand. But I have been into astrophotography for a little bit over 5 years now, where I went from imaging this picture of the Horsehead Nebula, oops, to imaging this picture of the Horsehead Nebula. And basically what I have done is I have divided this video up into 3 parts. So in the first part I will tell you about the 4 requirements that each beginner astrophotography telescope should have, according to my personal opinion. And then in the second part of the video I will talk about the different types of telescopes that are out there and what kind of telescope is most suited to start your astrophotography hobby, also according to my own personal thoughts. And then in the third part of the video I will show you the astrophotography telescope that I have been using, this one, for a couple of years now. And I will also talk about other telescopes that are out there on the market in 2020 that you might want to consider when starting your astrophotography hobby. So let's get into the first part. So let's talk about those 4 requirements that I think are important when you are looking to buy a beginner astrophotography telescope. So the first requirement I would say is that your telescope has to be able to produce a high quality image of your deep sky object. So whether you are imaging a nebula, a galaxy or a star cluster, you want a telescope that produces a good quality image. And some of the cheaper telescopes, they actually suffer from what is called chromatic aberration. And chromatic aberration basically means that the telescope is unable to produce the correct colors of a deep sky object. It produces a false colored image of your deep sky object, and this is of course something you want to avoid. And the second thing is that the chromatic aberration also results in purple halos around your white bright stars, and that is very ugly and something you want to avoid. And the second thing you want in high quality pictures is that your stars are nice and round. And what is often an issue in astrophotography is that you have nice round stars in the center of your image, but when you go look towards the edges of those images, you will see that the stars are getting more oval, they look more like a comet and or star trails, and you want to avoid that. So the second requirement I would say is that you want a telescope that is affordable. So when you're looking for your first astrophotography telescope, you're starting out this hobby, you have to learn a lot of skills, it takes some time and effort to do that. So I would say don't spend a lot of money on your first telescope. Of course this depends on your financial situation, but yeah, you might fall in love with this hobby, you might not, and then you end up having to sell that telescope again. So yeah, that's just my personal opinion. So affordability I think is important when you start out astrophotography. The third thing I would say is ease of use. So you want a beginner telescope that is very easy to use. So let's imagine that you want to image from remote locations, then you don't want a telescope that is very heavy and bulky to carry around and to put on your mount. And yeah, I think that is very important. And also you want a telescope that is ready to go. So once you have set up your equipment, you want to engage in astrophotography. You want to image objects in the night sky, and you don't want to wait for instance, a cool down period of a telescope. So yeah, I would say ease of use. And then the fourth requirement is low maintenance. So when you start out your astrophotography hobby, you want a telescope that is relatively low in terms of maintenance, because you want to spend most of your time just outside learning all of the skills you need to learn to do astrophotography. You don't want to spend that time necessarily on calibrating and maintaining your telescope. So these are the four requirements that I would look for in a beginner astrophotography telescope. So the first is high quality picture. The second one is affordability. The third one is easy to set up and use. And the fourth requirement would be relatively low in terms of maintenance. So let's talk about the different types of telescopes, and let's see whether each of those types of telescopes meet the requirements that I have just mentioned. So in this second part of the video, I just wanted to compare the different types of telescopes that are out there on the astrophotography market today. And please keep in mind, I'm making this video for people who are looking for their first astrophotography telescope to start their astrophotography hobby with. So I'm going to keep this a little bit general. If you want to add something to this presentation that I've made, don't hesitate to put some comments in the comment section below so we can get into a conversation. I always like that. It is social media, so engage in the conversation if you want. So I think when you are going to start buying your first astrophotography telescope in 2020, you have to know the main difference between refractors and reflectors. And it's not so difficult, so let's get into that. So a refractor is basically a lens-based system. So you can see here you have an objective lens that captures the light from a deep sky object, for instance, and then it refracts that light onto an eyepiece of this, can also be your the sensor of your camera, and then you can engage in visual observations or astrophotography. One thing you have to know about refractors though is that there are different types of refractors. So we have the single lens refractors, also called the achromat types of refractors. You want to avoid that for astrophotography because they are not able to focus the different parts of the light spectrum, so the blue, the green and the red part of the light spectrum. It will not be focused onto the same plane, for instance the same camera sensor that you are using for astrophotography. So you will end up with a false colored image of your deep sky object that you want to capture. And it will also create this very hideous purple halos around the bright white stars that you are capturing. So don't go there. I would not go there. Don't buy an achromat, but you want maybe to buy an ED or a doublet or a two glass type of refractor, or an APO triplet type of refractor which uses 3 glasses. And the main difference between an ED and an APO, you can see it here. So the ED, it focuses the red and the blue part of the light spectrum correctly onto your camera sensor, but it will create some false colors with respect to the green. But in the universe there's not a lot of green light there, so you can actually consider an ED or a doublet for astrophotography, especially because they're also a little bit cheaper to buy. And the APO triplet, you can see that it correctly focuses all of the light in the light spectrum onto your camera sensor, producing a correct colored image of your of the object that you want to image. Then we have the second type of telescopes. They are reflectors or mirror based, and this is also not difficult to understand. So we have light here, it comes in from your deep sky object that you're interested in imaging, it falls onto a mirror and then it gets reflected. So that's also why they are called reflectors. So the light gets reflected from the primary mirror that sits at the base of your telescope onto a secondary mirror and then into an eyepiece, or maybe you have here your camera that can image the object. That is a very nice system, and you have many different variations of reflector type of telescope. So you can see here, this is a Newtonian, so you have a primary mirror and it bounces on a secondary mirror and it reflects again into an eyepiece that sits in front of your telescope. But here you have a Ritchie-Chrétien type of telescope where you have a hyperbolic primary mirror, it bounces off a hyperbolic secondary mirror, and then it ends up in on the camera sensor or the eyepiece that is on the back of your camera. So that is something you might consider, those differences. And There are actually many different reflector types or mirror-based types of telescopes, and I have mentioned 5 of them here. So on the one hand we have the refractor, and I would say buy an ED or an APO refractor if you're interested in astrophotography. And then you have all kinds of reflectors. So we have a Newtonian reflector, a Ritchie-Chrétien, a Rowe-Ackerman-Smith astrograph, a Smith-Cassegrain, and a Maksutov type of telescope. I don't want to get into the specifics of each of those Newtonian, of each of those reflector type systems, because that would take too much time for this video. Instead, what I am going to do is to take my 4 criteria that I think are very important when you want to buy your first astrophotography telescope. And then we are just going to see whether or not these telescopes will meet those criteria. Hi folks, I'm also interested in your personal experiences, so please let me know what kind of telescope did you buy to start your astrophotography hobby, or what kind of telescope are you considering to buy to start your astrophotography hobby. Let me know in the comment section down below and we can get into a conversation with each other. And with that, let's move on with the video. If you have anything to add again, or you disagree with me, you're welcome to, and please leave a comment in the comment section so we can get into a conversation. We have to distinguish planetary types of planetary astrophotography from deep sky astrophotography. And actually 2 types of telescopes, the Smith-Cassegrain and the Maksutov types of telescopes, they are perfectly suited for planetary astrophotography. They have a big aperture, they have a long focal length, they have a high F ratio. This makes them all perfectly suited to capture the moon and the planets in our own solar system. But that makes them less well suited for deep sky astrophotography, because for deep sky astrophotography you need actually a little bit lower F ratio, and you might also want to start with a relatively wide field of view. So what you have to understand is that the Smith-Cassegrain and the Maksutov, they can focus on a very small piece in the night sky. But that also will make it more difficult to track that very tiny object in the night sky accurately. You have to have a high quality equatorial mount, and you have to have high quality tracking gear to be able to do that. So I would say that is not for a beginner. So that leaves us with these 4 telescope types. So let's get on to the second criterion, or what was it? Criterion? That I have used, which is affordability. And then I would say, although the Rowe-Ackerman-Smith astrograph is really a king of astrophotography, I would say this is a very high quality telescope that you can buy. It is also very costly because, I think in the US it goes an 8-inch RASA, it goes for about $1,700, and in the Europe we have to pay the import VAT, which is often 20%. So then the RASA will be you can buy them for about 2,000 euros. And do you want to spend that amount of money on a telescope when you start your astrophotography, also knowing that you need other equipment as well? So you need an equatorial mount, you need some tracking gear, you need a camera. So I would say the Rowe-Ackerman-Smith astrograph is maybe something you will buy as a second or a third telescope if you like the hobby. So that leaves us with the 3 types of telescopes, and then of course we can talk about the ease of use. And then I would say the Ritchie-Chrétien is a little bit less easy to use as compared to a refractor or a Newtonian reflector. Now, why? Because the Ritchie-Chrétien, it has also a little bit of a longer focal length and a higher F ratio. So it is usually about F8 as an F ratio, which makes it very suitable to capture very tiny objects in the night sky. So for instance, a galaxy that is far away. Not referring to Star Wars or anything, but these are very tiny in your field of view, and a Ritchie-Chrétien is actually perfectly suited to zoom in on that galaxy. But again, that also requires you to have high level tracking capabilities, so a high level tracking mount. You also need to master those skills. So I would say a Ritchie-Chrétien is also more of a telescope that you will buy as a second or a third telescope. So that leaves us with a refractor and a Newtonian reflector. And then, the 4th requirement that I have mentioned was maintenance. So maintenance, I would say, the refractor wins here. because there's no maintenance required basically. So you have a lens-based system, and these lenses, they are just fixed in front of your telescope. You need to put the refractor in a box, and you need to keep it safely in your house, of course. But yeah, I mean, no maintenance required. And the Newtonian reflector, it actually requires collimation. So collimation is basically the fact that you have to align the primary with the secondary mirror in order to produce a sharp picture for astrophotography. And sometimes these mirrors, they are out of alignment, and you need to collimate your Newtonian reflector. And actually this is something you can learn. It also requires you to buy some extra tools in order to do the collimation. But I would say when you just start doing astrophotography, you want to spend as much time outside, setting up your gear, capturing objects in the night sky. And maybe you don't want to spend that time on collimating or maintaining your telescope. So for me, at least, I would say the clear winner for a beginner astrophotography telescope in 2020 would be an ED or an APO refractor. And yeah, of course you can disagree with me. Please, if you do, let me know. I would also say that the refractor is very easy to use because yeah, it is usually very lightweight, especially the wide field refractors, which are maybe 3" or like 60 to 100 millimeters in aperture. They are very easy to carry around, to set up. They don't require any cool down time. You can just start your imaging session. That is really nice. So yeah, the refractor, and then I want to move on to the third part, where in which I will show you my own refractor and the choices I've made to buy that refractor for astrophotography purposes. And we are also going to look at some of the refractor, the ED and the APO refractors that are out there that you might want to consider to start your astrophotography hobby. So let's move on. So hi folks, yeah, I just wanted to show my first astrophotography telescope that I bought to get into this hobby. And that's the Telescope Service Photoline 80mm telescope. And I bought it at a German company, Telescope Service, which is pretty popular in Europe. And yeah, I have to say I really like this telescope for several reasons, so let's get into that. First of all, this is an 80mm aperture 480mm focal length telescope, so the f ratio of this telescope is f6, and yeah, this makes it a pretty good suitable telescope for deep sky astrophotography, of course, for also the fainter objects such as nebula that are out there to capture. And yeah, there are a couple of things that I also really like, such as we have here the standard dew cap that is included on this telescope, so you can just extend the dew cap, and yeah, it will protect you from some humidity and moisture on humid days or humid nights. I have to say, in the Netherlands it can be so humid that you still would need a dew heater to keep your lens perfectly clean. But anyway, I like the fact that this thing is included in the telescope. Also, if you look at the triplet APO elements, there is one element that has the FPL53 glass. And yeah, as I said, I'm not a technical expert, but if you look at all of the fora, you will read that the FPL53 element is a very high quality piece of glass, and it will actually produce the correct colors of a deep sky object. And yeah, because this is a wide field refractor, there are plenty of advantages, because yeah, it's easy to carry around, it's not so heavy, it's easy to set up and use, and of course it will give you a wide field view. So with my ZW1600 I have about 1.5 to 2 degrees of view with this refractor, and that makes it perfectly suitable for those very nice nebula that are out there in our galaxy. So you can see some of them over here actually. So we have the Hard Nebula, the Rosette Nebula and the North America Nebula, and these are actually not a true color, these are narrowband images, but anyway, so you can see that you can perfectly capture those kind of nebula. Also the Orion and the Horsehead Nebula, they are pretty popular, of course, among starting astrophotographers. You can really capture those kind of nebula using this such a wide field refractor such as this one. What can I say more? So it was also included, these two rings are included, so I mounted my tracking gear here, so the tracking telescope with the tracking camera here. And what I also really like is the fact that it has this robust focusing system. I hope you can see it. So you have here the black wheel and the golden wheel. Actually, the black wheel you can turn it around for rough kind of focusing, and then for fine focusing to really get these pinpoint sharp stars in your picture, you can use the golden wheel, which is much more accurate in terms of getting these pinpoint accurate stars, basically. So okay, yeah, this is basically these are some of the reasons why I bought this telescope as my first astrophotography telescope to start my hobby. And I have to say I am not disappointed that I did that. I really got some great value out of it. It produced some great images for me, so yeah, I can highly recommend it. But of course, yeah, there are many wide field refractors out there, so let's take a look at the astrophotography market and see what kind of telescopes are out there that I would consider in 2020 to start off your astrophotography hobby. So hi folks, in this part of the video I just want to quickly show you a little bit what is available in terms of an APO refractor, a wide field APO triplet refractor that you want to buy maybe for your first astrophotography as your first astrophotography telescope. I know that there are many different sites and many different options, so please do your own research, check out the different sites that where you can buy telescopes, and just also go to fora and ask people who have bought the telescope already what their experiences are with it. Let's check out here in the US. For instance, OptCorp is a very famous online shop where you can buy your astrophotography gear. And yeah, I basically have made some selections. So we want a refractor that is maybe 3 or 4 inch, so 67 to 126 millimeter if possible, with a price below $1,000 or up to $1,000. So and then you can see I have put also f7 up to f4 or faster here as a search term, and then basically you can see that there are 6 interesting options at OptCorp at least. So you can see here an Explorer Scientific, which actually has a large aperture, so it's a 102 millimeter aperture, so it's more as compared to the 80 millimeter telescope that I showed you, my own telescope. And yeah, it's an APO triplet refractor, so that's I would say it's a very interesting option for below $1,000. I'm actually surprised that these refractors keep getting cheaper and cheaper. And then also this 80 millimeter triplet carbon fiber option from Orion, the Orion refractor telescope. This is really a popular one that a lot of people have bought. And yeah, what I always do is I will of course read the description. And then it says, for instance, that it has this FPL 53 extra low dispersion glass. And this is the high quality piece of glass that you want to look for in an APO refractor, because yeah, it gets you this true colored image of a deep sky object. Not to say that other types of glasses are maybe of lower quality, but I just know that the FPL 53 is highly liked among astrophotographers. So yeah, always also check if it's really a triplet APO refractor. Sometimes you think you're looking at the triplet, but you are actually then looking at the doublet, which only has 2 pieces of glass, as I showed you before. So check that, always check out these kind of things. And also I would also look at the F ratio. For instance, this is an I don't know what kind of F ratio the Orion has actually. So the Orion, it has an F6. And then I saw here, for instance, the Explorer Scientific 80 millimeters also is an f6 triplet, but then the Evo Star, which is also a triplet, the Skywatcher, it has an f ratio of f7.5. And I think I would always go for the telescope that has a lower f ratio, because you don't need a lot of exposure time to capture the deep sky objects that you are interested in. So let's switch over to a European shop. This is Telescope Service here, a very popular online shop in Germany and throughout Europe. I basically selected on APO refractor below 1,000 euros. And we have here, is this English or German? Suchergebnisse. Maybe I have to switch to English. Anyway, so this really surprised me. The TS Optics Photoline 150mm f7. It is $9.99, of course, just €1 below the 1000. But I'm really surprised that this has a 150mm aperture and it's an f7 triplet APO. It has this FPL 53 glass, so that's really interesting. I would say I wouldn't have expected that these triplets of 150mm you could buy them below the €1000 range, but yeah, TS Telescope Service has one. Very interesting buy, I would say. Of course, you can here see some of the other brands telescope service telescopes they have. So the 80mm f6. This is the one I have bought actually. It's now for €848. I think I bought it a little bit at a higher price actually 2 years ago. So you can see that these prices keep on dropping for refractors at least. Yeah, just a lot of options, of course. The Vixen, Explorer Scientific, you can see here also only €592. The 80mm f6. I think, is this a triplet APO? I would say Öffnung 80mm. I think I can switch to English, right? Aperture of 80mm focal length. There was an f6. Yeah, it's a 3-element, so it's an APO refractor with better chromatic correction than a 2L. Yeah, it's better than a doublet. But I think it doesn't have the FPL 53 glass. I think Explorer Scientific, it uses a different type of glass. But anyway. So I would always say check out these sites, go to astrophotography fora, ask people who have bought the telescope what their experiences are with this telescope, and yeah, basically do your own research. So hi folks, we're at the end of the video. I just want to thank you for watching, and I have noticed that I have reached 1000 subscribers on my channel, so thank you very much for subscribing, especially the people who subscribed in January. You can see the names over here. And of course I will continue to make astrophotography videos, so if you want me to handle any kind of topic, please let me know in the comment section and I will see whether or not I can make a video out of it. If you like this particular video, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. I really appreciate that. And of course I hope to see you in one of my other videos on my channel. And yeah, until that time I want to thank you for watching. Clear skies. See you later. Bye bye.